Do you think that a watch is just a way to tell time? What if it steals your life? In this city, everyone has lost a few minutes, and some, all the time they had. Today, an investigation will begin that will change everything. Every second counts. It's a rainy night. A young woman lies unconscious on the sidewalk. Next to her is a broken watch on her wrist. A few minutes later, she dies. The pathologist examines the body and says that the time of death coincides with the moment when the watch stopped working. At the police station, Detective Alexander receives a case on strange deaths. Each victim is different, but all of them have watches that stop at the moment of death. They begin collecting evidence, questioning witnesses, analyzing surveillance video. Alexander notices that someone is stealing not only watches, but also the time of life. In the archive, he finds an old newspaper with a story about a mysterious man nicknamed the Watchman who could control time through watches. The second victim appears. A young man is found dead without a watch on his hand. The police record that the watches disappear from the bodies of the victims. Alexander understands that the criminal acts systematically. The police conduct experiments with stopped watches, but they do not work even when charged. The detective goes on the trail of a suspicious collector of antique watches. The pawn shop is filled with strange pieces, each with a stop time. The owner of the pawn shop refuses to cooperate. Alexander decides to set a trap and become the next victim. He puts an expensive watch on his hand and waits. At the appointed time, a mysterious man appears. The sentry. A brutal fight begins between them. The sentry tries to take the watch from Alexander, and with it, his life. The detective breaks the criminal's watch. Something mystical happens around. The dead watches disappear from the victims, as if freeing them from the curse. The sentry is arrested. Alexander addresses the camera. Time cannot be stolen or stopped, but it can be valued, and this is what saves us. Dawn over the city. Alexander looks at his watch. It is ticking as always. Time is life, and no one has the right to steal it. Do you think that a watch is just a way to tell time? What if it steals your life? In this city, everyone has lost a few minutes, and some, all the time they had. Today, an investigation will begin that will change everything. Every second counts. A rainy night. A young woman lies unconscious on the sidewalk. Her hand is adorned with an expensive watch. The hands are frozen at 23:07. The ambulance arrives too late. The woman dies. The pathologist carefully examining the body and the watch. The time of death coincides with the moment when the watch stopped working. I can't explain how this is possible, but it's definitely not a coincidence. At the police station, Detective Alexander receives a case that immediately seems strange. In his hands is a dossier with several cases where the victims died at an age and in circumstances that seemed unrelated. But they all have one strange thing in common: stopped watches on their wrists. He talks to his partner. All the victims are different, from young to old. No one looks like each other, but the watches on all of them stopped at the moment of death. How can this be? Maybe it's a coincidence, the partner says skeptically. Non bada. There are too many coincidences. Someone takes not their watches, but their time. Alexander begins to study the archives, trying to find at least some kind of connection. Among the old newspapers, he finds a story about a man nicknamed the Watchman, a legendary killer who could control time through his watches. The story sounds like a myth, but it becomes the basis for a hypothesis. Meanwhile, a new message comes in. A young man was found dead in his apartment. He doesn't have a watch on his hand, although he always wore one. The police record. Watches are disappearing from the victims' bodies. Alexander understands that this is a systematic action. Trying to solve the mystery, the police conduct experiments with the victims' watches, trying to restart them. But the watches remain dead, even after careful charging and repair. Alexander visits a pawn shop of antique watches where the owner collects rare and unusual models. Among them is a watch with stop time. The owner is nervous, refuses to cooperate, stating that he has nothing to do with the murders. Alexander decides to take a risk and set a trap, putting an expensive watch on his hand, a potential bait for the killer. At night, a mysterious man appears in a dark alley. The sentry. He quietly approaches Alexander and tries to rip the watch off his hand. A fight begins, full of tension and danger. During the fight, Alexander breaks the sentry's watch, and something unusual happens. The atmosphere around him changes, as if time begins to flow again. The watches on the hands of all the victims begin to tick, as if freed from a curse. The sentry is disarmed and arrested. At the police station, Alexander addresses the camera. Time cannot be stolen or stopped. It must be valued. Every second is life, and as long as we understand this, we are alive. Gradually, the city wakes up. The ticking of clocks can be heard on the streets again, filling the air with the rhythm of life. Alexander goes out onto the balcony, looks at the awakening city and says quietly, "Time is a gift. Never let anyone steal it from you." The camera slowly moves away, showing the first rays of the sun over the city. After dawn, Alexander stands for a long time on the balcony of his apartment, looking at the awakening city. There is a feeling of freshness and slight coolness in the air, but tension reigns in his soul. Over the past weeks, the world around him seemed to have stopped. The watches on the hands of many people froze, and with them, their lives froze. People disappeared, as if dissolving in time, and each such disappearance left behind a mystery and fear. The phone in his pocket suddenly vibrates. Alexander takes out the device and sees a message from an unknown sender. "You saved the city, but this is only the beginning. Time is the first victim. The next ones are closer than you think." His heart begins to beat faster. He understands. The watchman was just a puppet in the hands of a more powerful enemy, and the real nightmare is just beginning. He gathers his team at the police station. The walls of the office are covered with photographs of the victims, diagrams, graphs, and a map of the city with the points of disappearances and deaths marked. Alexander, pointing to the map, says, "All these cases are connected, not just coincidences. Someone is stealing people's lifetime through their watches. We need to find a common thread that will tie all this together." His partner points to the intersection of the last three incidents. "Note how the disappearances and thefts of expensive watches intersect here. Perhaps the criminal is using the watch as a tool or even a weapon." Alexander decides to delve into his research. He spends long hours in the ancient library, studying ancient manuscripts, legends, and scientific treatises on time, curses, and artifacts. Among the yellowed pages, he finds a mention of a mystical device capable of stopping and stealing time from living beings, allowing its owner to control life and death. He reads, "Time is a force that can be directed, distorted, and controlled. But the price for this is the loss of humanity." Meanwhile, strange phenomena occur in the city. Clocks on the streets and in apartments suddenly begin to stop. People complain of dizziness and sudden weakness. Some lose consciousness. Alexander understands that the criminal is increasing his influence, and the threat is growing. To understand the nature of these anomalies, Alexander turns to a physics professor, an expert in time theory and anomalies. The professor shows data from devices recording powerful electromagnetic bursts that coincide with crime scenes. He explains, "Someone is using technology that allows manipulating time flows. This is incredibly dangerous because any interference can disrupt the structure of reality." Alexander and his team set up sensors and cameras in the places most susceptible to anomalies to catch the criminal in the act. Meanwhile, the sentry, imprisoned in the solitary confinement, is silent, but there is a mysterious fire in his eyes. He seems to be waiting for something, preparing for a new stage of the game. On the night of the next major incident, the systems detect anomalies with unprecedented force. Alexander goes outside and comes face to face with the Lord of Time, a man with terrible strength and determination to bend time to his will. He declares that he wants to stop the suffering of the world by controlling everyone's lifetime, and is ready to destroy those who stand in his way. A brutal and intense fight begins, in which Alexander faces not only a physical enemy, but also internal questions. What is more important, absolute control or freedom of choice, time or life itself? The battle takes on a philosophical tone, where every second becomes decisive. In the finale, Alexander defeats the enemy with great effort, breaking his device and freeing the city from the curse of stopped time. He understands that time is not a resource that can be stolen or controlled, but a gift that must be protected and respected. The city slowly begins to return to life. The clocks on the streets are ticking again, people are smiling and moving forward, and life itself continues its endless flow. Standing on the balcony and looking at the dawn, Alexander quietly says, "Time is life itself. Never let anyone steal it from you." The city that never slept now seemed frozen in time. After the defeat of the Time Lord, everyone hoped for peace and restoration. But in the shadows, a new, much more sophisticated threat had emerged: the Time Police. This organization, created under the guise of salvation and order, declared that they would now control how each person uses their time. Their motto was simple: don't waste time. But behind these words was a cruel reality. The Time Police began with raids and arrests of those considered time criminals. People disappeared without explanation, families were left without loved ones, and on their wrists, watches stopped forever. No one saw how and where the stolen time went, but it was not returned. Officers walked the streets in strict uniforms, with cold looks and sensors that tracked every moment of the citizens' lives. Alexander received more and more reports of missing people. They didn't just disappear. Their lives seemed to be erased from reality, taking away an invisible reserve of time. The more Alexander investigated, the more clearly he understood. It wasn't just watches that were being stolen. The time of life itself was being stolen, and no one was safe. Delving into this mystery, he discovered a secret technological complex where real barbarity was taking place. People's time was carefully recorded, counted, and taken away using complex algorithms. This machine subjugated the lives of thousands of people. It decided who lived on and who disappeared because they wasted time. Alexander spent nights in the archives studying dossiers, records, and reports of the Time Police. He saw numbers and reports, but behind them were real destinies. A young mother who simply wanted to relax, a student who allowed himself a few hours without studying, an old man who sat quietly on a bench in the park. They all became victims of a system that measured their lives in minutes. The system worked inexorably. Every moment that was not confirmed as useful cost a person his life. The city was turning into a cold mechanism where human freedom dissolved in algorithms and numbers. People were afraid to show emotions, afraid to slow down, because it meant death. Alexander meets with a Time Police officer, a young man who sincerely believes that this is how he saves society from disintegration. They have a tense conversation. "You want to steal people's freedom," said Alexander. "Time is not a resource to be used as you please. It is life itself." "No, time is a resource that must be valued," answered the officer. "We give people a chance to become better. We teach them not to waste precious minutes on empty things." "And who gives you the right to decide what is empty?" insisted Alexander. "After all, it is this decision that destroys people." At this moment, Alexander understands. In order to save the city and return people's lives, he must destroy the system from the inside. With the help of several loyal friends and former colleagues, he penetrates the Time Control Center, a huge server room with rows of blinking machines monitoring millions of biorhythms and time counters. Alexander sees how the stolen minutes, hours, and days add up to a huge data stream, which is then redistributed according to unclear algorithms. In a tense and dangerous operation, he shuts down the main server. At the moment when the systems begin to fail, relief begins to be felt throughout the city. The clocks that stopped for thousands of people start ticking again. Those who disappeared appear again, as if returning from oblivion. A crowd of the freed gathers in the square. People cry, laugh, hug. They got back the most valuable thing: their time and their lives. Alexander addresses them. Time is not a commodity or a resource for manipulation. It is life itself. No one has the right to take it from you without your consent. The city gradually returns to normal life. People learn to value time again, not as an obligation, but as a gift, as an opportunity to love, create, make mistakes, and live. In the evening, Alexander stands on the same balcony where it all began, looking at the flickering lights of the night city. His heart is heavy, but there is hope in it. He knows that the fight for time and life is an endless game, but he is ready to play it. Time is not just the hands of a clock. It is our essence. Never let anyone steal it. At the very moment when the city began to return to life, and people once again felt the freedom of time, Alexander noticed a strange movement on the screen of his phone. A new message was blinking there, without a sender, without a signature. Just one phrase. You think you've won? Time is not only something we can measure. What we've lost will never return, and the real game is just beginning. Suddenly, the watch on his wrist stopped. An eerie silence fell around, as if time had frozen in the air. Alexander tried to take a step, but he couldn't. His body seemed frozen in a trap of an endless second. His gaze met a dark reflection in the window, and there he saw not himself, but a faceless face, whose time he could not steal, but which was now stealing him. The phone screen flickered again, and the final message appeared. You're next.